Lonesome Dove. Chapter 21. Jake awoke not long after dawn to find Lorena up before him. She sat at the foot of the bed, her face calm, watching the first red light stretch over the mesquite flats. He would have liked to sleep, to hide and sleep for several days, make no decisions, work no cattle, just drowse. But not even sleep was really under his control. The thought that he had to get up and leave town with Lori was in the front of his mind, and it melted his drowsiness. For a minute or two, he luxuriated in the fact that he was sleeping on a mattress. It might be a poor one stuffed with corn shucks, but it was better than he would get for the next several months. For months, it would just be the ground with whatever weather they happened to catch. He looked at Lori for a minute, thinking that perhaps if he scared her with Indian stories, she would change her mind. But when he raised up on one elbow to look at her in the fresh light, the urge to discourage her went away. It was a weakness, but he could not bear to disappoint women, even if it was ultimately for their own good. At least he couldn't disappoint them to their faces. Leaving them was his only out, but he knew he wasn't ready to leave Lori. Her beauty blew the sleep right out of his brain, and all she was doing was looking out a window, her long golden hair spilling over her shoulders. She wore an old threadbare cotton shift that should have been thrown away long ago. She didn't own a decent dress, and had nothing to show her beauty to her advantage. Yet most of the men on the border would ride 30 miles just to sit in a saloon and look at her. She had the quality of not yet having really started her life. Her face had a freshness unusual in a woman who had been sporting for a while. The thought struck him that the two of them might do well in San Francisco, if they could just get there. There were men of wealth there, and Lori's beauty would soon attract them. "You don't look like you've changed your mind," he said. "I guess I've got to get up and go buy you a horse." "Take my money," she said. "Don't get one that's too tall." She gave him Gus's $50. "Hell, I don't need all this," he said. "There ain't a horse in town worth $50, unless it's the mayor of Calls, and she ain't for sale." But he took the money, thinking it was a fine joke on Gus that the money from his poke would buy Lori a mount to ride to Montana, or however far they went. He had known perfectly well Gus would try something of the sort, for Gus would never let him have a woman to himself. Gus liked to be a rival more than anything else, Jake figured. And as for Lori going through with it, well, it relieved him of a certain level of responsibility for her. If she was going to keep that much independence, so would he. Lorena kept looking out the window. It was as if her mind had already left Lonesome Dove and moved up the trail. Jake sat up and put his arms around her. He loved the way she smelled in the mornings. He liked to sniff at her shoulders or her throat. He did it again. She didn't reject these little morning attentions, but she didn't encourage them either. She waited for him to leave and go buy the horse, running over in her mind the few things she could take with her. There was not much. Her favorite thing was a mother-of-pearl comb Tinkersley had bought her when they first got to San Antonio. She had a gold, thin ring that had been her mother's, and one or two other trifles. She had never liked to buy things. In Lonesome Dove, it didn't matter, for there was nothing much to buy. Jake sat and scratched himself for a while, smelling Lori's flesh and hoping she would encourage him, but since she didn't, he finally got dressed and went off to see about horses and equipment. Before Jake had been gone 10 minutes, Lorena got a surprise. There was a timid knock at her door, She opened it a peek, and there was Xavier, standing on the stairs in tears. He just stood there, looking as if it was the end of the world, tears running down his cheeks and dripping onto his shirt. She didn't know what to make of it, but since she wasn't dressed, she didn't want to let him in. "Is it true what Jake says?" he asked. "You are leaving today?" Lorena nodded. "We're going to San Francisco," she said. "I want to marry you," Xavier said. "Do not go. If you go, I don't want to live. I will burn the place down. It's a filthy place anyway. I will burn it tomorrow." Well, it's your place, she thought. Burn it if you want to. But she didn't say it. Xavier had not been unkind to her. He had given her a job when she didn't have a penny and had paid promptly for whatever services he required. Now he was standing on the stairs, so wrought up he could hardly see. "I'm going," she said. Xavier shook his head in despair. "But Jake is not true," he said. "I know him. He will leave you somewhere. You will never get to San Francisco." "I'll get there," Lorena said. "If Jake don't stay, I'll get there with someone else." He shook his head. "You will die somewhere," he said. "He'll take you the wrong way. We could marry. I will sell this place. We can go to Galveston and take a boat for California. We can get a restaurant there. I have Therese's money. We can get a clean restaurant with tablecloths. You won't have to see men anymore." "Except I'd have to see you," she thought. "Let me come in," he said. "I will give you anything, more than Gus." She shook her head. "Jake will kill you," she said. "You go on now." "I can't," he said, crying. "I'm dying for you. If he kills me, would be better. I will give you anything." Again, she shook her head, not quite sure what to think. She had seen Xavier have fits before, but usually fits of anger. This fit was different. His chest was heaving and his eyes poured tears. "You should marry me," he said. "I will be good to you. I am not like these men. I have manners. You would see how kind I would be. I would never leave you. You could have an easy life." Lorena just kept shaking her head. The most interesting thing he said was about the boat. She didn't know much, but she knew Galveston was closer than Denver. Why was Jake wanting to ride to Denver if they could take a boat? "You better leave," she said. "I don't want Jake to catch you up here. He might shoot you." "No," Xavier exclaimed. "I will shoot him. I have a shotgun. I will shoot him when he comes back if you don't let me in." Lorena hardly knew what to think. It was crazy behavior. Xavier didn't seem to want to budge from the stairs. He did own a shotgun. It was not likely Jake would let someone as pitiful as Xavier shoot him, but if he shot Xavier, that would be almost as bad. He already had his Arkansas trouble from shooting someone else. They might not get to leave if there was a shooting, and Xavier looked desperate enough to do anything. Then Xavier began to pull money out of his pocket. It was hard to say how much he held out to her, but it was a good deal more than $50. It might even be $100. The sight of it made her feel tired. No matter what plans she made or how hard she tried to live her way, some man would always be looking at her and holding out money. Without giving it much thought, Mosby had started something that nothing seemed to stop. She thought Jake had stopped it, but he hadn't. His talk about killing men was just talk. If he had cared that much, he probably would have shot Gus, friend or no friend. It was hard to believe he would even shoot Xavier, probably. He would just give her another slap and forget about it. "Please," Xavier said. "Please, I need you." At least it might calm him down, she thought, opening the door. Also, he was usually quick as a rabbit when he came to her. "I ain't messing this bed," she said. "It's the last sheet." Xavier didn't care. He put the money on her little chest of drawers and turned to her. Lori shut the door and leaned against it, lifting her shift. With a grateful look, Xavier dropped his pants. Soon his legs were trembling, so she was afraid he would collapse before he was done. But he didn't. When he finished, he put his head against her bosom for a moment, wetting her breasts with his tears even as she felt his drip on her thigh. Then he stepped back and pulled up his pants. "Goodbye," he said. "Well, I ain't left yet," she said. "We're not going till this afternoon." Xavier looked at her once more and left. His look startled her. It was like the look in her pa's eyes when he died in Baton Rouge. She watched him go down the stairs. He went slowly, as if feeling for each stair. He had scarcely been in her room 2 minutes, but her shift was wet with his tears. Men were all strange, but Xavier was stranger than many. When he finally made it to the bottom, she turned and hid the money. It was just one more secret she had from Jake.